You are tuned into Mostly Humans. The opinions and views shared by the hosts of this podcast are uniquely their own and do not reflect the view or opinions of the companies they work for. P.S. Don't sue or fire us. Thanks so much. Now let's get into the episode.
I love that. This is what I'm going to say is pretty profound. And I think, well, it's not profound that I'm saying it or the way I'm saying it. It's just a profound idea. I don't want people to walk away from this thinking I'm more egotistical than they already think that I am.
Profound Matt with the point. All right. Welcome back to Mostly Humans, an AI and business podcast for everyone. We break down complex topics and the latest in AI to benefit you, the everyday person, and help showcase how these tools can impact your business operations today, which is very fitting given the topic of today, which we'll get into in a little bit. But I'm Justin Wright. I'm joined by my co-host, Matt Bigelow. Matt, how are we doing this week?
I'm doing well. I don't know if by the time this podcast comes out, I will have announced the company that I've joined or not. But I can tell you, I'm back onboarding. Being a new hire at a company has been really intense. So we actually had to take a little bit of a break from recording. Even though we only carve out like an hour a week for these recordings, Justin was gracious enough to kind of let me be the new guy for a week. I am slowly ramping, learning a lot. And we're actually creating AI workers. And AI workers are basically kind of like AI agents, what we've spoken about, but they have skills. And then those skills actually call on agents. So
Very cool.
I've taken a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in the last like 3 or 4 episodes here and the knowledge that I've gained over time working in the field. And I'm trying to deploy it all in like a new and novel way for me. So my brain hurts, but other than that, I'm doing good. What's going on in your world?
Oh man, yeah. It's I think we both had a week. I had a very, very busy week at work, just craziness and all good problems, but with high demand comes a lot of work. You can't escape that. But this actually, not to go on a deep fitness tangent, but this actually brought up a very good point that I've given as advice over the years to many people who got frustrated and didn't want to listen to it, and now I am in the seat where I have to listen to myself, where very, very high stress work week, a lot of hours. And so I was consistently waking up with my HRV, heart rate variability, being well below baseline, which is a sign of poor recovery and you're not going to be able to train with as much intensity. And so seeing the signs, I dialed back a little bit of the intensity of my workouts this last week, because if you try to push too hard during those times where your body isn't ready or your nervous system isn't ready, then that's where you get injured or you end up losing a couple extra days or a week because you like really put yourself in the hole. And so for anybody who is, a fitness enthusiast or working towards something, the thing that I always tell people and have told people over the years is all stress goes in the same bucket, whether it's fitness stress, work stress, relationship stress, life stress. And so if you have high stress in some areas, then it's going to reduce your ability to manage stress in other areas. So you have to be able to adjust your effort accordingly, play the long game, never give up, basically don't worry about giving up a day if it's going to cause you to lose a week, especially in terms of training or whatever else. So that's my fitness tidbit of the week.
It's actually a really important topic, and you can get caught up in like the just be hardcore, never surrender type of attitude, but it's actually chemical what you're talking about. So the same chemicals that your brain uses to send a signal to make your mouth move or to flex your bicep or do things to do a pull-up is also the same things that it uses for cognitive function, and that it deploys for stress. And like, it's like a bucket. And if you're not filling up that bucket every night when you're sleeping, you don't have enough of that. So if you ever like working out really hard or training hard and you say you have like brain fog at work, or the inverse, vice versa, you're using so much of your brain power and then you just feel like you can't do what you want to do when you're going for a run or when you're working out, it's because you are pulling from that same source. And it is important that people remind you every once in a while, especially in the day and age of social media. It's just like, keep going, keep fighting through, keep having discipline. You also need to have discipline to back off or you end up with a serious injury. I got to tell you, I was in New York this week, and I'll hold back some of the details, but I was at a pretty exclusive event comprised of about maybe 24 mid-market and enterprise companies. And the topic was all about the future of work in AI. And it was so cool because, like, I work for a startup and I talk to enterprises and mid-market companies every day, but I don't necessarily get to talk to companies that aren't someone that is actively evaluating our technology. So I think you and I probably like have a feeling of what we think the enterprise and the future of work is going to look like. But we're a little bit biased because we are like, okay, yeah, I talked to this Fortune 100 company. I talked to this 2,000 person mid-market company. I have a good feel about what people want, but like we only know them and get to meet them if they're interested in our products and services, right?
Yeah.
This was just
yeah.
very generic. Lots of people in like the retail business there. There were people in the healthcare business there. There was B2B software there, and everyone is curious. I know that's our topic for today, but it really just further corroborated for me that this is an episode we need to do. And it's probably the most important episode for us to do, which is to talk about the future of work, where you and I see things going. We obviously can't predict the future. We work with these tools every single day. We work with companies that are considering using them. In some ways, they automate mundane tasks and entry-level work. In other ways, they create new opportunities for new positions and such. So I think this is an important topic for us to address. It'll probably span the scope of 2 episodes. So I think this is a huge topic. I wanted to kind of kick us off by asking you a question, which Scout's honor, Justin and I worked together for a long time. We never had this conversation at work. In fact, I don't think many people that work for AI companies stop and have this conversation with each other. You got to focus on the job. Do you think the future of work is like a dystopia, or do you see a utopia, or do you see kind of something in between?
Ooh, good question. I'm going to give the boring answer and say in between, and I'll explain why in a moment. So yeah, the future of work, honestly, I think it's somewhere in the middle. I think and I think that this is a multi-part conversation, because I think there's some people who aren't taking advantage of the future that exists in the present, meaning the technology today that can actually make their lives substantially easier. And that's going to be kind of the first part of the things I think we can talk about. And then, in terms of the future, I had the privilege of being able to sit in at an MIT event later last year. And the president of MIT Sloan was talking about and gave a presentation on how he thinks AI will impact work. And while I didn't agree with everything he said, he was saying a lot of people are likening this to the Industrial Revolution, which it is in many ways. And he actually used the Industrial Revolution to ground the AI conversation of, if you actually look at the Industrial Revolution, it was a massive change. But in reality, the obviously quality of life for everybody got much better. And a lot more jobs were created than were lost by the shift to factory work and kind of looking at it through that lens. I think life will get better, work will change, but I don't think it's going to it's not going to create this utopian world where nobody has to work and robots do everything and we just like drink pina coladas by a pool. But I also don't think the Terminator is going to happen. So I think it'll be more or less the same with some fundamental differences in the way that we do our day-to-day job.
Yeah. And I also think that the Industrial Revolution was like the beginning of like the automation or the offloading of things that involved our muscles as humans, right? Like physically, like plowing fields and things like that, which we no longer need to do. We have combine machines for that. I think the reason so many different arguments out there about where this one is going is because this is the first time that we're really turning over labor. Our minds have consistently been responsible for doing that part of the labor because of what large language models are currently capable of. And I think that's why people are generally scared of it, right? Nobody wants to lose their job. I don't. I think about this topic all the time. I think it would be very naive of me to think that I won't at one point in my lifetime lose my job to technology, whatever job it is. And I hope that I'm resilient enough and adaptable enough to figure out a new way to plug into that new world. So I don't think because I'm in AI currently that I can see around all the corners and there won't be a big technological disruption that comes my way. So I think it's very normal for all of our listeners. You're saying to yourself, like, I'm trying to be optimistic. Occasionally AI dread creeps in, or maybe I have AI dread all the time and I'm listening to this podcast because I want to become more optimistic. To be on a bit of a seesaw is totally normal. And I think we can actually become very, very relevant as humans with agency and creativity in the future of work. And it stems back to that podcast clip I sent you. And there was somebody who basically highlighted that human beings, in a lot of ways, when we do knowledge work, we are kind of acting like large language models. And like, what does that mean? In traditional schooling that you and I went through, our teachers were large language models, and the textbooks we read were large language models. If you're willing to go with me on this for a second.
Yeah.
Now, of course, our teachers had like high EQ, and they help nurture us, and they're almost like parental figures and stuff, and they do amazing work. But like in its simplest terms, what were they doing? They were repeating things that were written down by people in front of us about mathematics, about science, about history. And so was the textbook. And then they sent us home with homework to go read that things that we were repeating more and more. And then we came back and we took tests and quizzes to see how much of that we could remember and pattern back to them.
Yep.
But there's a thing that happened, and then they tell us about the thing that happened, and here's how it works. And then we need to repeat it back. And then we get out into the workforce, and a lot of the jobs, especially the entry-level jobs that I was doing, oh my God, AI could run over what I did for the first 4 years of my career working for a market research company. I learned how to learn in school, right? And I also through school learned how to engage with other people and influence people and make friends and create teamwork environments at work. But at the end of the day, I took those skills and they said, hey, here's a new pattern for you to learn. A client sends in a bid, and that bid, we can either do it or we can't. And you got to plug the numbers into this system. It's going to spit out a thing, and then you send it back to them via email. That's literally what I did for 4 years. Okay. That was pattern matching. Now, Matt, actually had a lot more to offer on the creativity side. And I started to tell them things I think we could do better, ways we could work better, etc. But the main function was to repeat this pattern. And I think as we're thinking about the things that we do day in and day out as professionals, if you are largely in an unregulated industry, as that was market research, not regulated, right? It's not like regulated by the federal government. And you are largely doing text in, text out, output patterned work over and over again. That never necessarily was highly intelligent work. I think the highly intelligent work was once I learned the pattern that they taught me, when I started suggesting new innovative ways that we could do things and we started making more profits and stuff, that's where the intelligence came in. But the job that I had, the importance that I felt about the job to be done was largely tied up in that pattern of text in, text out, sending it back to the client. And I think those parts of jobs, not jobs, but those parts of jobs are definitely on the table to be automated away. And I think we can also then potentially, I know this is like a classic argument people make that maybe people are sick of hearing, but free ourselves up to actually be more creative. And I think creativity, it means like novel and new usually.
Yep.
And all these LLMs and agents can do is pattern things back to us that have been documented and learned about by humans. So I think we'll still need to work in industry and learn a lot about industry in order to be creative in it. But I think that it's important to recognize what patterns of your job are going to go away and how to change. And I've already recognized that with my job currently and the job I had before this as well. And I'm like, okay, so how am I going to be more relevant in a different way? I think that's an important place to start.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And, even if you look at business or the business landscape now with the social media marketing and the tools that we have available with the internet, right? We've already seen several examples where some of the most successful entrepreneurs and founders of the last 20 years, even 30 years, are people who kind of grew up in this age of the internet, started to learn these tools, and they were creative, and they weren't, most of the time, weren't the best students. There's actually a book I really like by Malcolm Gladwell, David and Goliath, talks about how seeming disadvantages end up actually being advantages in some ways in life. And he was talking about how several successful founders and entrepreneurs are actually dyslexic. And the reason for their success is because they had to figure out ways to learn that worked for them, and it improved their creativity and their problem solving. And so I think we've seen a world now where a lot of these successful entrepreneurs and business people are not necessarily the best students or the people that could do this rote memorization work the best, right? It's people who have actually started to think creatively. And it takes me back to, I saw another clip recently from Kevin O'Leary, who is saying when he looks for businesses to invest in, he's looking at founders who aren't spending 100% of their time working in the business or just doing that. He wants people who have some level of creative expression or freedom, whether it's arts or music or writing or something where they're using the other aspects of their brain, because you need that growth in all ways. And when you're talking about how AI tools might free up creativity or time to be creative, the way I think about major periods of human development, if you look at any of the major Renaissance periods, it's life got a little bit easier for some massive reason, whether it was, the birth of agriculture, or we talk about the Industrial Revolution. And as civilizations develop throughout history, you have these periods where the day-to-day struggles get a little bit easier because some technological advancement happens. And then you have this period of artistic or creative renaissance where human beings now have capacity to do some of these things that I think are uniquely human. I think if you look at images or art or video or music created by AI now, it's impressive what it can do, but it's not truly unique or creative. And you can usually tell the difference, even if it looks like a real image or a real photo. The human psyche picks up on things that are created by AI right now, because I think there's that unique human element that is missing from some of this stuff. And so that's a very long-winded way of saying that I think the point you're making is incredibly interesting, because I think we, maybe a partial utopian view is we might be on the verge of some next renaissance or creative renaissance because of the technology freeing up some brain capacity here.
Wow. I hadn't thought about it like that. That's really, I love that. It is true. So basically what you're saying is like renaissances, especially in like the arts, entertainment, or the parts of human existence that are very uniquely human, we took some big steps forward as a human society in those areas shortly after we got through some of like the practical make life business or efficiency a little bit more easy type of things. And I think you're right. Like, it's really cool how like you can generate a song. Like, I actually love the song for intro our podcast, fully AI generated, right? And it's catchy, do 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 do, and then it fades out. Very catchy, but like, it doesn't matter how well AI could learn how Taylor Swift songs sound. It can make things that are catchy, good for intro to a podcast or whatever. But like a huge reason that Taylor Swift is, I think, arguably the most successful pop star musician of all time, according to the numbers, is because people know that she is the writer of the songs. She's very much an open book. And she's talked about how sometimes looking back at something she wrote when she was 16 is cringy, but is how she felt at the time. She still continues to put herself out there because she knows that's what resonates with people. They feel like they know her. They feel like they know her struggle. So you can make music that sounds like her, but it's not going to sell out arenas. She could probably sell out 365 days a year in Madison Square Garden and just do a residency in New York, right? And it's because she's human that people connect with that. And I think that like that's an important thing for us to recognize, is that like, yeah, there's these advances, but then we still, I think, really need to want to work with humans. For example, right now, anyone listening to this podcast can go buy a car from a car vending machine with Carvana.
It is crazy that you can do that still, but
Yeah.
yes, continue.
It has nothing to do with AI, right? How many of you are buying your next car, from a car vending machine? Like, it's like honest, transparent pricing. You can literally go pick it up. You don't have to deal with a sales rep, which apparently people don't like to do. And they still find themselves, when it's a big purchase, usually it's a 5-figure purchase, sometimes a 6-figure purchase for an automobile. You just kind of want to go to talk to somebody, right? So like we could automate without AI the purchase of an automobile, and we haven't. So I do think that like it's interesting to think about, as we think about like how do we stay relevant? What is the future of work? Just because something can be patterned away, there might still be a human component to it. My old market research job, no. There was no that client did not care. I was a box for an input. They would send me the specs of what they wanted. I would send a reply to them. Most of them, I never talked to them on the phone. They never saw my face. That could easily be that type of a thing. Also, like there is Opendoor is a really interesting non-AI technology that makes it so you can go onto an app in your phone. You can say, show me all the houses in this area. As long as you sign up for the app and like you put your driver's license in wherever they know you're a real person, I could look at the map, click on a house that is being sold by Opendoor. I don't have to wait and schedule with someone to get in. I don't have to talk to a realtor, nothing. And they'll give me a code, I'll scan my phone, and the door opens and I can go in and look at the house and check it out and move on. It's not massively disrupting the real estate industry because people want to engage with people. So that's another thing that people need to think about. If it's classic input, output, and it's a pattern the AI can learn, be careful. But also, I think those are two examples, like car salespeople, people who sell homes, where even though we can automate it away, we're not going to anytime soon because it's not what people want. They still want to interact with humans.
Yeah, I agree. So much of business is relationship driven. Think about how many industries depend on relationships. Financial advisors, to your point, realtors, a car salesman. There are so many things that I think, depend on the human experience. Going to a good restaurant, for example, there's an award-winning chef and, you go there, there's the experience, you're dealing with your server who is trained in hospitality. I read a book about, or one of the examples they used for like elite teams was actually the Gramercy Tavern wait staff and how they were trained by that restaurateur and how like all of the little details where there was a family that was talking about how they wanted to try some dish, but it was really expensive. And one of the servers overheard them and heard that it was like some special weekend for them. So told their server, who then sent it out complimentary on the house because they said, we heard this was a special weekend for you and figured you might want to try this dish that you wouldn't otherwise try. And so those little layers of human detail that make experiences memorable, that make things like that truly enjoyable, like those depend on humans. I have this whole theory that memory is largely driven by human interaction. So if you think about your best memories, most of the time you'll be fuzzy on some of the details, but you almost always remember the people who were involved. And a lot of times the memory is anchored around those people who were there. And I think that that's biologically hardwired. I think that as human beings, for the preservation of our species, there's all this stuff that we are biologically wired to do that rely on those relationships, which can be a completely other tangent and completely separate episode. But in order to not go too deep into the philosophical realm, which I don't know if all of our viewers would want to go there, if we talk tactically, I actually read a story recently that I thought it was a really good example of this future of work now, like what is possible now. And there was an executive from Zapier or Zapier. I still don't know how to pronounce it. I'm so sorry.
One day they'll tell us.
One day they'll tell us. But they were at a business dinner, and he was at a table with, there was name tags at the table. And he, off the top of his head, didn't know who any of the people at the table were, but he knew that they were affiliated with the business, whether they were customers or vendors or whatever. And so what he did was he had connected via MCP, which we talked about in a previous episode. So if you haven't listened to that, listen to that episode. But MCP had been, they had connected it to their CRM systems and some of their other stuff. And so what he did was he literally took a picture of each name tag and uploaded it to this custom GPT that he had built. And leveraging MCP, it gave him all of the information on each person at his table with a little bit of background, like whether they were a customer, what their annual renewal rate was, like how long that they had been a customer, how long they had been a vendor, all these little details that he was then able to interact with those people and say, oh, thank you for being a customer for 5 years, or I really appreciate your recent vendor deal or whatever. And so it gave him immediate context on these people that just on name tag alone, he wouldn't have known. And I think that that is a really tactical example of something incredibly powerful that previously would have taken hours of dedicated research. He would have needed those names ahead of time versus just being able to snap a photo. And now you have instant context for everybody that you're about to interact with at that dinner.
Right. That's an example that a lot of us can take away and say, how much of your brain power did you used to spend doing research or looking something up or this, that, or the other thing, right? And we all know, as we kind of started the podcast talking about, there's only so much of literally the chemical that lets you do the thinking and the weight training and the running per day. As a human, you just can't do too much. You get worn out, you get fuzzy. That individual now has the ability to go do something really valuable for their company, which is charm people, create relationships, maybe find potential new leads, new customers, enhance the relationship, prevent some churn because the AI enabled them to do it. A lot of that drudge work is now freeing us up to do the other parts better because you only have so much capacity each day. If you were a sales rep and you really prided yourself on reading 10K reports and then doing super thoughtful outbound or thinking about how to expand your products into an enterprise based off of their 10K report, which is when they basically like reveal everything that's going on inside of their business to the general public, that's no longer a differentiator for you. So are you screwed? Are you out of a job? No, it just depends on what you choose to do next. Now what you can do is you can do your research faster, right? So you need to ask yourself, what part of this job am I not doing well at? Maybe I spend a lot of my time doing this research because I'm actually afraid of this other part, or it's intimidating. I like to do what I'm good at and I waste too much time here. So if you continue to do nothing and add new skills, then now you're a worse sales rep because other people can do that research in like 45 seconds using AI now. But if you say to yourself, where am I weak? Maybe it's price objection. Maybe I don't really know anything about my competition. And I always put that off because I'm over here doing this research and that's my unique skill. That's a very just small example of how you have to be adaptable if you want to win. People who want to punch in, check out. They don't want to see things change. They're happy. They're content. I am scared for people like that. And I'm deeply actually concerned about people like that. But if you are a go-getter, if you're listening to this because you want to be informed and you've always been adaptable, when a new competitor came out, you adapted. When economic times turned up or down, you adapted. And you always said to yourself, okay, what new thing do I have to do now? And human beings are one of our greatest capabilities is being adaptable. Then all you have to do as parts of your job get automated away, parts of Justin's have, parts of mine have. Justin and I work with some of the most brilliant engineers on the planet. Parts of their jobs have. Well, now there's a new expectation for what they should be able to do if that part could be done with AI. And it's the ones who sit there and complain that I used to hold a lot of my self-worth with that part. Or that part, they used to pay me for that part, and now they no longer do and want to sit back. They're in trouble. But I think in every field, you know what parts of your industry, listener, are easy to automate with LLMs based off of you playing with ChatGPT and the little you now know about agents from Justin and I, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I think you just need to first just ask yourself, what part of this job am I not that good at, or do I constantly avoid and I should be better at? And take this as an opportunity to get better at that, because the part that you used to be good at, if it was tied up in all this pattern stuff, that is where AIs are brilliant. You give it data, say, this is how we do it. This is what it always looks like. This is what the outcome should always be like. This is how it should always sound. They're going to do that part really well.
Absolutely. And I think for people who are afraid of technology, if you zoom out and you look at technology and its impact on humanity, right? Everything goes in waves. You know, it's like a sine wave or cosine wave for any of my fellow math lovers out there. But the baseline always ends up higher. So think about, like, if you're looking at a graph and you have this wave and you also have this line making steadier linear progress up and to the right. That's essentially the march of society with technology. Is things are cyclical, they happen in waves, but the baseline keeps getting better and better. And that's very much like AI now. To Matt's point about AEs and outbound or whatever, there was a period where really thoughtful outbound was the way to go. And then there was a period where AI tools or automations before modern AI started making it easier to send mass emails and these email campaigns. And then those started doing really well. And now we're actually seeing lower ROI on mass email campaigns, and really thoughtful outbound is actually winning again because people are filtering out the noise now that it's so easy to draft messages at scale or even slightly personalized messages at scale. So the person who is automating their research and is taking the time to send more thoughtful outbound to fewer targeted accounts and actually building relationships, just like in sales, my grandfather was a steel salesman, many, many moons ago. it was a relationship business, and the people who built those relationships and were thoughtful with their outreach and their messaging did really well. We're back to that same place, but quality of life baseline is higher. And so AI is a force multiplier. It might be the biggest force multiplier that any of us have seen in our lifetimes in terms of how much more it allows you to do by leveraging it. I think it's unique in that sense. I think it's the biggest force multiplier we've seen, bigger than the internet, mobile, all this other stuff. But at the end of the day, it's a force multiplier. It's taking your human potential, your ability, and it's allowing you to leverage that at a much larger scale than before. And, not to go too deep into the technical weeds, but you talk about AI, senior engineers who now have AI tools. We did our vibe coding episode. What I am seeing as a trend for engineering, for people who are using AI to help them code, we are now back at a place where most of the time and effort is actually spent in the architecture phase, in actually designing the system and thinking holistically about what is this piece of technology going to do? How does this software fit into our larger, technical ecosystem? So actually spending the time to really dig into those details and think about that. And then you let the machine write the code, but you give it very, very clear instructions. You spend a lot of time as a human thinking about how these systems are going to interact and how it's going to work. And then you leave the boring part, which is actually tapping on the keyboard, to the machines. But all of that other stuff still requires human brain power and creativity.
I love that. This is what I'm going to say is pretty profound. And I think, well, it's not profound that I'm saying it or the way I'm saying it. It's just a profound idea. I don't want people to walk away from this thinking I'm more egotistical than they already think that I am.
Profound Matt with the point.
As it relates to technology, if you have a creative idea, you can now generate wealth if it's technologically related. Full stop. I want everyone who's listening to this to think about that, because everyone who's listening to this has had a cool technology idea, right? My wife actually had the idea for like the biometric fingerprint to unlock your phone literally like a decade before it came out. And the little bit of research that I've been able to do, probably like 7 or 8 years before people were even thinking about doing it. But did she live in Silicon Valley? No. Did she know engineers? No. Did she have access to capital? No. Was she in college just trying to figure things out? Yes. Like, I can go on and on. I spend the rest of the episode talking about all the reasons why her good idea would probably just be very intangible for her to actually go execute on. And it's really because engineers still are arguably one of the most expensive base salary positions on the planet. They're hard to get access to. It's hard to get access to capital. It's hard to get access to infrastructure, data warehouses, data centers. The whole list goes on and on and on. And as we talked about in the vibe coding episode that you just brought up, which if you guys haven't listened to that, check it out, because we go in depth about how you can actually just use your ideas now and get things done. Yeah, maybe parts of your job might get automated. Maybe your full job might go away that you're doing today in a year or two. But that is offset by the fact that you have had so many good ideas. You listener, whoever you are, you have had so many good ideas. And I bet at least half of them are related to technology. And now, for the first time ever, you can go create wealth for yourself, right? You might say to yourself, well, I listened to the vibe coding episode. I'm not sure if it can get all the way there or whatever. It's going to get you 70, 80, 90% of the way there. And then maybe you need to spend a little bit of money to have someone QA something or work on a tough integration. You can't vibe code for yourself. Okay. It's still now in the realm of possibility for a vast majority of people. So there's always, I think, there's a pro and a con to everything, but I think we're going to see technological revolution, because instead of just the few people that have access to these people, and frankly, you and I didn't, maybe it took us forever to break into tech and we finally broke into tech, but just because we're in software doesn't mean we even have access to capital and people and meetings. Yep. But now the whole world does if they have access to high-speed internet. Now, not everyone does. Hopefully we can fix that. But that still just means not the whole world, but a huge chunk of the world just got a level up and a seat at the table, because there's not so much friction between their idea and what they want to go execute on.
Yeah. That's super cool. I do think that's such a valid point, that our goal as a human species should be to create as much equal access and opportunity as possible, right? And, you know, I think we've tried to solve that problem in different ways. I think a lot of people are well-intentioned, but, you know, some approaches work, some approaches don't. But the best way to solve some of these problems is exactly that. It's how do we provide the most access to the most people? How do we provide the most opportunity to the most people? And the relationships with so-and-so's third aunt who knows this, you know, VC or whatever will always exist. That's never going to go away. You know, again, because humans, we are relationship driven creatures. But if you can now create more opportunity, and I think that's really what spurred this whole wave of engineering talent in places as the internet created more access, as high-speed internet became more prevalent, you started to actually see incredibly talented engineers, developers, technologists, founders come out of these countries that otherwise didn't have this opportunity because you now created this access. And to your point, if AI creates even greater access to even greater people, well, where now you don't necessarily have to be an engineer, you just need to have a really good idea that you can explain well. Or, you know, maybe you and a couple friends, where one of them is a little more technical, one has an idea. Now, as a collective group, you can create a product and you can actually launch a product or a minimum viable version of that product. You can outsource the marketing to AI. You can figure out how to run your whole advertising strategy, and you can literally build and test ideas in real time easier than ever. That is a very exciting take, and I think is a good Advil pill, if you will, to the dystopian headache that a lot of people have with AI.
Yeah. If I think back, I was not wired as a child to be successful if I wasn't getting, I think about the game Operation, you know, when you're trying to like grab the bones out and you get zapped. If there wasn't people constantly zapping me on a straight and narrow, and that was like my parents, my teachers, my friends' parents, and everyone's just like, you got to get good grades, you got to study, you got to go to college. Left to my own devices, I would have been like, I just want to have fun. I just want to play video games. I don't care about like homework and all that stuff. But thankfully, this whole huge network of people pushed me through this system, kept zapping me every time I tried to go sideways. And then it created opportunity for me to get a job and get a position. There are people in parts of the world who are naturally wired or don't even need to be zapped to truly be on like the perfect straight and narrow for success. And prior to the internet or prior to AI, just had no chance to be successful in maybe like launching a company or a product or enhancing a service. So like, I think like our collective intelligence, or it's wrong term, collective creativity and opportunity to make things better, to make better products, services, whatever it might be, just went up, because they say about like 2 or 3 billion people on planet Earth now are using LLMs fairly regularly. And that's so exciting because we are only limited by our creativity at this point, but so much of us couldn't get our ideas out or couldn't get them started or couldn't get them prototyped. So like, you know, I feel very fortunate that people pushed me to do the right thing, and when I otherwise maybe wouldn't have. And now the people who really deserve that shot, who don't grow up where everyone's pushing you to do this and get the education and force you to do your homework and check, did you actually do it? They're going to get the opportunity that they deserve, I think, and that makes me excited.
We're seeing that model change now because the way that we're creating value is different with technology now and with AI now. So the first thing I would say is I actually think AI is such a higher leverage capability that doesn't require you to have a bunch of capital, because you can get a $20 a month subscription to ChatGPT Plus or Claude Pro or whatever, and you can build a lot of this stuff for $20 a month. Even if I actually saw somebody do the economics on this recently. They were saying that they use Claude Code on the $200 a month plan from Anthropic, but they were actually using $8,000 to $10,000 a month of engineering compute. So it's like, yes, $200 a month sounds like an expensive price tag, but if you're getting that much out of it, like it's a no-brainer investment if you're a power user and you're using this stuff that much, right? So it's like they were like, I'm using $8,000 to $10,000 of tokens a month for $200. This definitely isn't going to be a membership that exists forever. Like they're going to stop this at some point, right?
Yep.
But so point being is, capital is always a requirement, but I actually think that barrier is lower now because of the fact that AI is such a high leverage tool. And I do think that now more than ever, the better ideas win. Before, you had to have a really good idea. and you had to have a lot of capital, or you had to know somebody who had a lot of capital, aka VC funded startups like doing really well. It's way easier to bootstrap a business with like a $200 a month, Claude Code Max subscription or whatever it is. And you have a good idea and you can iterate and test. So one, it's really hard to do that, which I actually think is another barrier of entry to just having money to throw at the problem, because you can't just buy a solution here. You have to give it some thought. And so I think that the scrappy founders, the scrappy entrepreneurs, the people who are willing to bootstrap their business, now they don't need to go and raise as much outside money as maybe they needed to 5-10 years ago. And if they're willing to like roll up their sleeves and kind of, eat dirt for a little while, as Gary Vee says, then now you have the tools at your disposal to actually be successful. But I don't think it just means that the rich get richer, because you can't just buy the problem away right now.
Another thing that I think is important that I wanted to just like get your opinion on is like everyone that has a company, a for-profit company, especially when they have public aspects of that company, has reasons to make you think, or make their competitors think, that they were this close. Or maybe they're looking to raise more capital to build more data centers and get more compute. So they want people to be excited. No, we're the ones who are getting artificial superintelligence. No, artificial general intelligence. No, it's going to be smarter than all of us. But far too often we see a headline as a society from the person we're like, oh, they are the smart person. They are the industry person. We all know them. They're incredibly wealthy. And we just take what they say and don't think about why. Most of you listening to this probably found us through LinkedIn. You probably post things about your company to make your company look good, to help your company succeed, get more leads, get more renewals, whatever it is. You have a motivation for why you say, what selective parts you leave out, the impracticalities of other things, but you post some cool video your marketing team made about your product or service because it's good for your company. These thought leaders and business owners who are going to have really just like massive impact on the future of things, they don't just say these things to us as people who are letting us in for the sake of letting us in. What's the reason behind it? They want to spook each other. They also want to spook other investors out of working with them and come to them and help them. And they want their government, Stargate, whatever it is, project to get in there and get the most money from the federal government. Like, just remember, everyone, if you feel dread about the future of work, we work in it every day. And it's super impressive and it's super cool. But it could probably help out with about like the bottom 5 to 10% of tasks that people do extremely well. And that can create billions of dollars in value. And that can be really good for companies. I don't think you or I are like, this thing ain't gonna just like turn itself on and just be this ridiculous thing. And the thought leaders out there that say that it is, I'm not saying I know what their motivation is, but I think far too many people are like, they said that, can you believe it? And it's like, they never stop and say, why did they say it? And that same person who doesn't stop and think, why did that person say that, knows that there's a motivation because they post on LinkedIn or something in a selective way to try to attract clients too. We all do it. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean that it's here. Doesn't mean that it's coming. They're not just these virtuous people who are here to tell us what's really going on the inside. They're trying to make money.
Yeah. Absolutely. I saw a video of one of those humanoid robots like dancing in the street, and it hit a curb and totally freaked out and like fell on the ground and like it broke or whatever. And it's like it can't even see the curb, like, and obviously the technology is impressive. It's incredibly impressive. But to Matt's point, it can't turn itself on and fix all the problems in the world today. Will it ever get there? I don't know. We can't predict the future. But I do think that's a valid point of a lot of the doom and gloom talk. You have to look at what are the motivations behind it. Why are they saying it? I think thinking of regulation, thinking of how governments start to work with this stuff is very important because it's important to think of things in terms of benefiting society and how do we actually leverage technology to benefit society. I think that's what a lot of these regulatory bodies are trying to do, which is an important fight. And so that stuff's all valid, but it's not like a soda machine where you put, a couple dollar bills in and you get a soda out. You can't just like put some money in and get a business out of it. Not yet, at least. And so, to foreshadow next week from a tactical standpoint, we can look at, even more of the things that you can do today. Like everybody can have a personal assistant today now that is either free or cheap. What does that look like if you, as a person, if you want to think about something for next week as this podcast is marinating, think about what are the things in your life or work today that you would offload if you had the ability to do so. And maybe we'll use that as a starting point for some of the discussion next week. But that's all I got, Matt. Any final thoughts?
And I just want to remind everybody, when you hear like artificial superintelligence, artificial general intelligence, singularity, all these like terms that the big tech companies are talking about, I think the subtext that we all think about when we hear that is massive job disruption, massive way of life disruption, etc. And just don't forget that the people who are saying those things have a vested interest in getting people to think that they're close to such a thing, because it gets them more money, more capital, more customers, more investors, et cetera. It doesn't mean it's wrong, but just look to people who don't have their future fortunes explicitly tied up in predicting the future as the ones who you're gonna listen to for advice on predicting the future. And on our next episode, we're going to talk to you a lot about how you can ensure yours based on the technology that we know exists today and that's accessible, about how Justin and I are using these tools all the time, because Justin and I are doing all kinds of work that literally the two of us could not do 3 or 4 years ago.
Totally. Yeah.
So we've kind of like swerved into the lane of some other job disciplines because the tools are there and we all can. And that's actually super exciting. So hopefully people feel better by hearing some of the optimistic sides of this stuff. And I wouldn't spend not even really more than like a minute or two per month stressing over things that most likely will never happen and that we can't control anyway. The only things in life worth stressing about are things that you have the explicit ability to change, right? When there's just so much good that we can experience from these products right now, today, that we've explored in this podcast and on future ones, I'd put my focus there. There's so much good that could be done. Let's focus on that for a change, because there's still so much benefits from this stuff that's happening. And I think it's important that we start to look at it optimistically and acknowledge, yeah, there's still some things that are scaring people. And we're going to get you guys through it here on the podcast and talk about it. And if you're not in AI, you can trust that Justin and I will tell you, as people who work in it, if there's something that you really need to be concerned about or something that's pending, but we don't see it. This feels like just really way better software.
Yep. Way better, but still software. So your jobs are at least mostly safe, and we will give you some tactical ways to leverage this stuff, or more tactical ways to leverage this stuff next week. As always, thanks for tuning in. We appreciate all of our lovely listeners. Have a wonderful week.
See you, everybody.